Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Live Local panel. I'm really excited to be here. Usually I'm the one talking, and today I'm not going to be. So I'm looking forward to moderating a very, very esteemed panel here we have up here. I will start by saying we have some naming concerns. We have two Davids and two Deutches. David Deutch and I are not related, but we've decided to just assume that we are, right? But we do have the same unusual last name spelled the same, and we both work in South Florida. So let me start by introducing our panel. So David Deutch is sitting in the middle right there. He is the co-founder and president of Pinnacle Housing, and they build high-quality multifamily, both affordable and market rate, across a number of different states, based in South Florida, but Florida, Texas, and Mississippi, I believe, right? And then sitting on his left is Sydne Garchik. She is another founder and president. I told you we have quite an esteemed panel here of MRK Properties. So Sydne is managing, building, and controlling over 4,000 units, 21 properties across a lot of states, including California, Maryland, Florida, Georgia, Virginia, among others. And then David Leon at the end there is a partner at Mullins, and he leads the affordable housing industry group. He's been working in that group for 27 years, it said. It's a long time.
Close enough.
Close enough? Okay. So he helps developers with tax credit, affordable housing, does almost $1 billion in tax-exempt bonds and the like. So we have a lot of knowledge on this panel, and I'm really looking forward to it. A background for myself real quickly. My name is Lesley Deutch. I actually don't do a lot of affordable housing. I spend my time, I'm a consultant for John Burns Research and Consulting, and do a lot of market rate housing, both rental and for sale. But I will tell you that I am fascinated by affordable housing because I am in and out of markets all over the country. And what I see is that there isn't enough for housing. And let me qualify here with, we are not talking, Live Local does not really target truly affordable. We're talking about workforce housing. We're talking about 120% of median incomes. And so just to give you a range and a base of what we're talking about, in Florida, the median income is $68,000. If you take 120% of that, that's $81,000. This is household incomes of $81,000. A lot of people wouldn't call that affordable. They would call that market rate, but we're calling it workforce housing. 57% of the people living in the state of Florida make under 120 or less, and that translates to about $1,650 on a market rent. So we're close to market rents, and that's what I just wanted to set the stage, sort of what we're talking about. Is we're not talking about people with no jobs. We're talking about people with jobs that can't afford to live in a really high cost environment. So with that introduction, what I'm going to do is turn it over to each person to give a short introduction. I'm going to start with David Leon, and he's going to tell us a lot about what Live Local is. There's been a change and enhancement that just happened last night, so we are getting right off the press here, and set the stage for us, and then we'll talk about how it can be implemented. So David, I'll turn it to you.
Okay, sure. You want to sit here and on the couch here? Is that okay? Or
yeah,
okay,
no,
good.
Sure.
I'm on the couch, folks. How you doing? So. My name is David. I'm an attorney. I've been NSCPA, UF Triple Gators, go Gators. Been doing this for almost 28 years now. So historically doing what we call affordable housing, which was people that earned 60% or less of AMI, area median income, is who our clients would build housing for, right? And a lot of money, billions and billions and billions of dollars, went down by the government to develop this housing, and that was affordable. And then all the Wall Street folks took billions of dollars and put it in this high-end market rate housing, right? So you have this high-end market rate housing, billions of dollars. You have this low-end affordable, billions of dollars. What's missing? The middle, right? And so you read these stories about the folks that work at a school live an hour away. And every day they're driving an hour in or a half hour in or 40 minutes in, and traffic's terrible because everybody's commuting to where they work because they can't afford to live close to where they work, right? So how do you fix that? Well, you pass what's called the Live Local Act. See, what I know where live local comes from is this: live local to where you work. Create some spaces where folks can develop some housing that can be affordable for folks to live there where they work. And two things that come out of this very important, this act. The first is, historically, we didn't know what workforce housing meant. We knew what it was, kind of who it was for, was never defined. This statute defines workforce housing between 80 and 120% area median income. That's a workforce housing. Below 80%, probably affordable, given some changes in the tax code we had a few years back. That's very helpful. When you define something, right? You define a situation and identify it, you can now start creating parameters to solve the issue. We now have a bunch of folks between 80 and 120 that need a place to live that's affordable, workforce, right? That's affordable, and we can create housing for them now and make that happen. The other thing that happened in this act is people have realized affordable doesn't really mean 60% or less AMI. That's not affordable housing. Affordable housing is a place that you live that you can afford. And that's not by income class. That's by individuals. That's by families, right? And so if you're making even $100,000 a year or more, but you're spending 50% of your income on your housing, it's not affordable. And so what we're going to find is, as we create this workforce housing, this missing middle, it's going to create more places for folks to live. It's going to maybe free up some units on our affordable side to live in and take some pressure off the market rate side. And the rent controls maybe go away. So this act, while not perfect, is going to have a huge ramification going forward. There's two things this act does primarily. The first is for workforce housing, it creates zoning or land use opportunities and says if you have commercial or industrial property, workforce housing as defined is a proper use of that land. That's huge. The second thing it does is create property tax exemptions for the workforce housing. So we said, okay, if I'm housing between 80 and 120% AMI for apartment complexes, I can now build this in an old abandoned Kmart. I can now build this in the abandoned industrial site. I can now build this along US 1 with all the places that used to have retail shops that have since closed down, right? And I can get an exemption to help pay for or offset some of these restrictions I have to agree to in order to qualify for this workforce housing. This is not a perfect statute. It creates some issues with local municipalities to say, when I zoned it commercial, I mean commercial, not housing. What are you doing, legislature? And so we'll get into it a little bit here on that dialogue we're having. But I think this is probably a pretty good overview, hopefully, of what you're looking for on what is live local.
No, thank you. Sydne, I'm going to turn to you for a minute. Can you talk a little bit about some of the properties that you develop, that you manage, and how affordable housing and workforce housing play into your business?
Yeah, sure. So we do mainly affordable housing. So like David Leon mentioned, kind of the 80% and below. But what Live Local has done in Florida is really opened up opportunities for us to either do only workforce housing or do a combination of affordable and workforce. A lot of states historically have had the property tax exemption, which helps subsidize rents between the 80 and 120. For example, California, which we do a lot of work in. So for Florida, this is super important and one of the only ways that we're getting closer to making that 80 to 120 housing work is by having that exemption. So we are currently working on one project that's 100% workforce, and we're also currently working on a development deal that would be kind of like an 80-20, where we'd have a portion workforce and a portion affordable.
No, that's great. David, Deutch, you want to talk about some of the projects that you're working on and how you're considering Live Local as part of the program?
Sure. Heretofore at Pinnacle, we started out and our primary emphasis for the last 20 years or so was in the affordable housing space. And fortunately, that space is there's a lot of definitional problems about affordable because affordable used to be defined as 60% of AMI and below. But today we're doing in affordable, we're doing 70 and 80% units. So we are trying to attack some of the deficiencies of the program that heretofore would limit us to 60%. Of course, also at Pinnacle, we build market rate properties that don't involve any government interaction or venturing, and just do the straight market rate and provide housing in that arena as well. We too have been frustrated by the missing middle. And what I used to do is go to all of my local elected officials and talk about ad valorem relief. And over again, the response is the same. We would love to provide some ad valorem relief as a tool to help you cater to this 80 to 120, but without the state and the legislature passing laws to allow us to do it, our hands are tied. So at the local level, until Live Local, ad valorem relief was not available in the context it is today. It had to be legislated up in Tallahassee as law and then handed down to the local cities and counties. And so now what that's doing is it's opening up a whole new arena for all of us to approach. And what's happening, interestingly, in the developer world is the whole land use section of Live Local is what everybody by and large talks about, because it is the lightning rod section of the legislation. Because of the height, because of the density, because you're going into commercial and industrial, and then you get the examples like the Clevelander on South Beach, all of a sudden that becomes the bill. And I'm happy to tell you that the bill is chock full of other programs and incentives that everybody should become familiar with, and we'll talk a little bit about today, because frankly for us, the land use is probably the least exciting for us, because we're Miami-based developers. We're not folks that want to burn bridges with local cities and counties. We tend to go into those places and work with folks and try to come up with solutions, rather than bring a stick in and say, hey, if you don't do what we want to do, we're going to use our stick and sort of force our hand here. That's not how Pinnacle wants to operate. So the rest of the bill offers a lot of incentives, and what David said was the biggest one that folks are talking about, and that Sydne and I and other developers are trying to take advantage of, is the ad valorem relief. So we are looking at properties, but you have to be judicious, okay? I talk to a lot of people and they say, oh, we got a new development, we're doing Live Local. And then they describe the development to me and I just scratch my head and say, okay, good luck. And I move on, because it's really not going to cater to every development type in every location. There's a bandwidth of development types, locations, et cetera, that when you pair with this program has the opportunity to be successful. And those are the opportunities we're chasing. Unfortunately, I could go on and on, but I'll stop here. But with any new legislation, there's some ambiguity, there's questions, and it takes time to adopt. And so what we're trying to do right now is educate equity stakeholders, as well as the debt providers, the financing providers, to sort of walk through the risk factors of these programs to see how far we can get in securing the requisite financing to make a ground-up development work using Live Local. And frankly, we're still in our infancy. The bill's not even a year old. They just passed an enhancement bill, okay, that passed yesterday or the day, yep. 2 days ago. Yeah. And it enhances certain things. Some local governments will say it is a detriment to what they're trying to achieve, but that's true of any legislation. You're going to have folks that are very excited about it and others that are reluctant. But it's in its infancy. It's a work in progress, and it's going to require everybody's work to try to get this to be a financeable tool in our toolbox.
Thank you. I think we can turn to David Leon if you tell us a little bit about the enhancement bill, because I know there's lots of talk about the challenges of Live Local, right? It is a great idea in theory, but a lot of challenges. Does the enhancement bill really address some of those challenges, and maybe walk us through some of the enhancements?
So the most important thing in the enhancement bill, because Live Local was passed in 23, the enhancement bill was passed this week. The most important thing about that bill is it passed 112 to 1. And it reinforces this legislature's intent that we are serious when we mean we want workforce housing in this state. And I can't tell you how much we've talked to local municipalities, and I get it. As David said, we're not here to hammer municipalities. This statute, by some, they think they can go to a local municipality and say, hey, that Kmart I'm going to use for housing and you can't stop me. And I can build, because I'm in a certain area, I can build 100-story tall building on that Kmart lot. Now, one, should you really do that, right? Is it really a good place for that or not? But two, more importantly, that same local that you're saying, I'm building a 100-story apartment complex on that Kmart parking lot, is the same municipality that has to issue building permits. They have to do fire inspections. They've got to give you COs, right? Are you going to go to that and say, hey, here's the hammer? It's just not practical, folks, right? But, so with that, the locals have said for the past year, legislature, you've gone too far, change the bill, make it easier. And instead, by and large, the legislature has said, no, we meant what we said. Now, we're going to clarify a little bit, and we're going to do some adjustments on airports. And if you're next to single-family development, we'll modify the height a little bit. But by the way, some tricks that you've been doing locally, like floor area, right, the FAR, we're going to make really clear how that doesn't apply to what we're doing. And we're going to make really clear on how this will work over here. So for me, the biggest thing is 112 to 1, and the glitch bill says, we're serious, we're here, this will continue. And oh, by the way, locals, and again, this is not, I love locals, I work with locals. This is not a threat against locals. But to the extent locals are going to stand up and say no, there will be glitch bill 2 coming out next year, right? And 3 and 4, until folks have a place to live that's affordable, close to where they work.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.
But by the way, it was 40-0 in the Senate.
40-0, yeah, there we go, yeah.
And for those of you who know Tallahassee, to get anything 112 to 1 on the House side and 40-0 on the Senate side, that's very, 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 very rare. So to David's point, this bill is definitely not going away, and so the question is, how do we take advantage of it to try to achieve its goals? And that's what we've got to. That's the key. That's what we got to work on and continue to evolve and work with elected officials and local governments and planning and zoning, and try to make these developments a reality.
Sydne, I'm going to turn to you for a second. And now you said that most of your business is that 60% AMI below, but now you're reconsidering with Live Local, it's going to make it a lot easier. What do you see going forward as some of your biggest challenges? I know you're optimistic about it and want to use it, but what are some of the biggest challenges that you think you're going to face as you start to really dig in and start to develop here?
Yeah, so I think just to add on to the Davids over here, in other markets that we work in, I think the reason for the seriousness is because we are seeing in other markets that it is almost impossible to put affordable housing back when you've lost it. And I think what Florida is doing with the zoning and with the exemption is trying to preserve what they have and increase density to keep it there so that we don't lose it. Because, for example, in other markets, to put it back is almost cost prohibitive. You see units that are $400,000 to $600,000 a door for an affordable unit, which is so beyond difficult to make work, especially with rising construction costs and interest rates. So I would say that I think the biggest challenge with this is really going to be on the financing side and making sure that we can make the math work. I think everything, kind of what David was saying, people are saying, oh yeah, I'm gonna build a 100-story tower. Well, that math is not going to work for you, workforce or not. So, what's really difficult on the capital A affordable, kind of that 80 and below, is making the math work, and it's the same for this workforce. So finding parcels of land where you can get economies of scale, but you don't really have to go up to 18 stories to keep construction costs lighter, are gonna make a huge difference. Interest rates staying quasi where they are and not going up, hopefully in the future, will also help stabilize things. But to me, it would be making the math work, and then also education in terms of local public on what does workforce mean. I mean, this is, I think what we're seeing a lot is lack of education with NIMBYism that's come up. But really, these are teachers, firefighters. These are retail jobs. You want to get a coffee in Starbucks, people need a place to live so that they can be in your Starbucks. So, I just think it's education and the financing are going to be the two biggest challenges.
David Deutch, a question for you. With those challenges, when I first learned about it, I interviewed a lot of different types of people, affordable housing experts and developers and market rate. And originally when it came out, the market rate was not interested at all. This is an affordable product, we're not gonna get into this. There are different types of developers going after Live Local, and you alluded to it earlier. Where do you think it's gonna end up? Is this an affordable developer product? Is this a market rate product, a mix of both? Who's gonna succeed here?
Well, the whole goal and intent of the legislation was to broaden the pool of participants on the development side, okay? There's sort of a cottage industry of affordable housing developers and that ecosystem, but this was designed to broaden the reach. The irony of the timing of the bill is, and everybody in this room understands it, is that when this bill passed last summer, pencils are down in every asset class of multifamily. So we're all like, I won't curse, but it was curse words, right? Darn, this is tough. We can't even do a market rate deal now, which heretofore was always achievable, and the rest of us operating in the workforce and affordable space were struggling to put deals together and cobbling subsidy and all that. And now all of a sudden you get this great bill with resources attached to it. But even in the workforce space, and to Sydney's point and David's point, and market rate, deals are tough to do right now for all the reasons everyone in this room knows. So I do think you have to be very particular in what you're doing. We have a set of criteria that we are trying to use to govern how we approach this. We probably wouldn't have targeted, without this bill, we're not targeting 120% AMI, okay? It's not gonna happen. So right out of the chute now, we have a development opportunity that did not exist heretofore, but is not gonna work on the 18-story pedestal building, blah, blah, blah. So we're chasing deals and looking at opportunities in locations that are not A locations, what I call path of progress, okay? Looking for, and the secret sauce might be at that level is the ad valorem relief, if you can underwrite to it. I have a lot of discussions with folks about being able to underwrite to it, as opposed to what my banks like to say is, oh, no. That's the juice, okay? You get that ad valorem relief on the back end, God bless you, it's a great deal, and now you made it even greater. No, I need it now on the front end to underwrite, because without it, and there's risk in that, both risk to me, okay, because if it's not available, or it's contested, or it's a problem, okay, or, it constrains my ability to be successful, and then obviously the lenders are hesitant right now to underwrite it, not to mention,
To that point, what I've done is inverse that argument. It's actually an advantage to you, because in our affordable housing space, if I take tax credits, I've got to commit to 30 years of affordability. In the workforce space, I only need to commit to 3 years of affordability for the exemption, and I can opt in and opt out as I see fit. So what will happen is this: if I do a workforce housing transaction and take this exemption, I can underwrite that because it's like every other exemption in Florida I apply for every year. That's no different than every other exemption we have, right? I underwrite that. However, if the market spikes and rents spike, I may realize I'm better off renting market rate and no longer in the workforce space. If that happens, I can immediately opt out and do that after my 3-year run and go market going forward. So as a lender's concerned, they're better off with this program.
They don't feel that way.
Well, they talk to me. They
Nor,
talk to me.
nor do they'll talk to you until they're blue in the
talk to
face.
me.
They understand the 3-year issue. Don't get me wrong. Okay, we all understand the 3-year commitment. But on the front end, when you're building a project and you have that level of risk and you've got equity and debt providers, and there's uncertainty of how the appraiser's office is going to treat the ad valorem relief, the enhancement bill did help, because now we know land and common areas included.
Yeah.
So the enhancement bill certainly added some value to how the ad valorem relief should work. But because people haven't done a project and tested every county appraiser, and there's 67 of them in Florida, the uncertainty is still what we're trying to overcome.
We just filed 112 exemption applications under Live Local.
But that was for built product. That's the difference.
Same
okay?
thing.
I'm talking about new construction.
Yeah, I get it.
That's what I'm saying.
I get it.
Okay? If your project's built and now you're just going for the exemption and you didn't underwrite it, if you get it, great. If you don't, so be it. But when you're on the front end, what we're running into is this educational component, and that's what I'm describing.
Have them call me.
You're hired.
Okay, Sydney, I'm going to ask you.
These things always work out well.
You should have heard our prepped call. It was quite enamored. Let me just ask one more question, because it's an important question that comes around, and you alluded to it with costs. How do you see this affecting land values? Do you see huge increase in land values for that old Kmart commercial space that used to not have any chance of redevelopment, and now have you seen that at all, or are you just watching it?
We do probably a third new construction development, and I would say that the beauty, while it's also the burden of increased construction costs and rising interest rates, is that market rate deals aren't really penciling right now, and we're doing less of that. So I think land values have just gone down because of that, just a natural decrease. And I think that people are trying to use Live Local to say my land is worth so much, but then when you actually go and underwrite, you're realizing that you just can't build anything. So I think we've just naturally seen a reduction in land costs, but I don't know that will stay, and as people figure out how Live Local is going to work. I also think that while you can say that you can now build 100 stories, to everyone's point, unless you know you can do it and you have certainty, I really don't see someone smart purchasing land that's based on all of that.
So how do we educate people? So we talked all about that. We're here in this audience. I'm learning from you guys. Is it municipalities? What's the best way to go about educating people about this bill and what the opportunities are, so the first impression isn't we're going to build a 100-story tower in the middle of suburban?
I think a little bit of it is time. I mean, I think a bunch of us have to go start doing it. It's in its infancy, as David said, and so we need to do it. A couple people need to get through a bunch of deals, and so we have a framework for how this works, and we need to try different structures, and we need to, get the financing done, and a lender needs to say, okay, I get it, and then I can understand it and underwrite it. So I think a lot of this is it's not going to work out tomorrow or overnight. It's going to be time and everyone learning the structures as we get through them.
I think one of the betas is going to be what David brought up, the 112 apps. So Florida Housing got about 14,000 units seeking the ad valorem relief. These are units that have been built, obviously, because it was as of 1/1 and the bill just passed. So the first beta we're going to get is we're going to watch the local appraisers deal with all of these applications for this existing housing to qualify for the ad valorem exemption. And for me, I'm going to watch that very closely, watch which counties do what, and sort of, you know, get a litmus and a firsthand view of, okay, because more than 112 were filed, but on all of these apps, there's going to be good results, and I'm assuming there might be some bad results, some pushback. Again, the enhancement bill helped codify certain question marks that impacted how the assessment was going to do. But there's still so much that goes into an assessment at each county level, and each county is different, that this will be the first real test we're going to get this summer, when all the assessments come out and we're going to see what happened. And then we just got to continue. Look, projects got to get built, they got to get financed. It's incremental steps for the ad valorem. But as I said, there's a lot of other things in the bill that are being implemented. Florida Housing just put out an RFP and put $100 million into Live Local to do units at the 80 to 120. They have another $50 million that they're coming out with later this year. This is a 10-year recurring program, $150 million a year. Plus, another element of Live Local allows state corporate taxpayers to direct their tax burden, instead of going into general revenue, which the state loves to collect and use for all of their projects. The bill allows up to $100 million to go towards Live Local. And at last check, Florida Housing said that last month that they had gotten that $55 million had been directed as of last month from corporations paying their taxes and earmarking it towards Live Local. So there's a confluence of events going on here that, as time passes, hopefully we're going to build a body of knowledge.
And with that, that's the financing side, right? And that's absolutely true. And you're going to see, one county sent a letter to our client that said, if you apply for the tax exemption, we're immediately filing this deck action against you. That's unconstitutional. Great. And so there's definite local pushback, and it brings up this issue of, locally tax exemption, they may not like that, but you think that's bad, you go to the county or the city and say, I'm building that 100-story tower here, they think you are, they're trying to shut it down across the board. So the other part of education is a couple things. One, educating the developer base, which these folks they get it. They're not here to hammer folks, they're here for long-term relationships, right? Educate the developers that call me and say, you mean I can go do this and they can't stop me? I said, whoa, let me stop you there. Before you even call the county, let me stop you there, right? And by the way, for interest, I received more calls on Live Local for the past year than anything in my entire career from people. 50% market rate, 50% affordable. Exactly. So it's the entire spectrum, driven in large part by what else are you going to do, right? Market is dead. But back to locals. Educate municipalities. We're here to work with you, not against you. Educate developers. This is a tool to level the playing field in a zoning meeting. When the local says, no housing here, you say, the statute says, now I'm not going to do that necessarily, but can we have a little dialogue still on this issue? That's helpful. There's one group of people we haven't talked about yet that Live Local is a death knell for when acted upon properly. NIMBYs. What's a NIMBY? Not in my backyard, right? We want to build housing because people need housing, and 50 green shirts show up to the commission meeting. We don't want that here because traffic, right? Drainage. We know why they don't want it there, right? This act is a way to stop NIMBYs cold because they don't have the right to come to commission meeting and stop your development because there is no commission meeting. That's the beauty of the zoning. I can get to the local commissioners or local zoning board and say, hey, I'm building this. It meets the land use code per Live Local. Let's go. And NIMBYs can't show up and stop me. And if you don't think those guys cost a lot of money, just ask these two about NIMBYs.
All right, I am going to leave a couple minutes to open up for questions because I know there'll be a lot. I'm going to end with one final question for all of you to answer. And it's, you're sitting up here we'll call it 5 years from now, you've taken full advantage of Live Local, and what does that look like? Have you developed thousands of more units? How is it a fight to the finish? What does it look like maybe we'll do 10 years from now, utilizing Live Local as we think the opportunity in a perfect world would be. But what's the future look like? Who wants to start with that one?
You want me to go?
Go ahead, David.
Well, look, obviously the future in our minds looks like this is going to stimulate activity and offer opportunities, okay? That's the goal. We believe in it. We believe this legislation is game-changing, and we're studying it and working it and looking at it and trying to develop parcels of land that we think would otherwise not be developable or would be done in a different manner. So for us, the 5 to 10 year landscape this is an opportunity.
Sydney?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bill lives up to its name, where people can live local. I think that's the point. I mean, from a racially and economically diverse perspective, we maintain communities as such and continue to build them out as such. So I think that would be our goal.
And David?
I would say that, along with that, less traffic or traffic ease, because you're living local for that. I think that 10 years from now, you will have a full underwriting on your tax exemptions.
Thank you.
So you'll be good for that.
Good.
And I also think that for the students out here, every one of you will be gainfully employed in workforce housing. I'm telling you, if you have not considered affordable workforce housing, it's just a huge market. I cannot hire enough people to do the work we have in front of us to get done, to close these transactions. And the thing that Florida has done is leading the nation. I'm involved I do stuff nationwide. I'm involved with several other states right now to roll out Live Local in those jurisdictions. This is a place you want to be. Put your flag right here. Make your career. And at the end of the day, when you sit back and you think, you know what? There's 1 million families that have a safe, decent place to live because these folks did a great job. You sleep well at night.
All right, thank you. What I'm going to do real quickly before we go to questions is just summarize
I'm going to be a lawyer.
The panel as we had it. I'm just going to run through what we talked about. I think it helps just to frame up all this stuff. We talked about Live Local as a missing middle. It allows people to live locally and be able to work. Does two major things: create these great land use opportunities and property tax exemptions for the workforce housing. The developers on our panel says it's the only way to get the 8120 projects done. It is they've tried it on a local level and it hasn't worked. They need that state push, and that's what the Live Local Act will do. Ad valorem relief is obviously the top advantage, and now we're looking at path of progress. I like that instead of path of growth. So path of progress to those markets. The enhancement bill, the big takeaway here is it passed 112 to 1 and 40 to 0 in the Senate. So this is a very, very, a bill that's got a lot of momentum and a lot of thought behind it. The biggest challenges include the financing side to make the math work, as Sydney told us, and obviously the education for the municipalities. But again, the biggest opportunities are going to be the broadened appeal to more developers. You're not going to have just affordable developers. Now you can have market rates, so more people building more affordable homes, and it levels the playing field. The education needed is going to be a little mixture of time and data. We're going to have to watch those appraisals and watch the appraisals come out this summer for the 14,000 units. And then to educate not just the municipalities, but the local developers too. I thought that was a really good point. But overall, a really optimistic tone. There's a lot of opportunity here, and for all the students in the room, if you want a job, go call David Leon right here. So with that, let me open it up to, we got more.
No, I'm going to law school after this.
Yeah, I know, go to law school. That's what I should have said. All right, let's open it up to some questions, please.
So I think it's a great idea and I think other states should do it too. There's a big crisis. There's always been a crisis of having people who have jobs, having a decent place to live near where they work. But nobody has talked specifically about the legislation. I read 40% of the units have to be live local. You can have more density. If somebody could talk specifically about what the bill is, what the enhancements were, and stop talking just in pluralities. Thank you.
Well, look, I'm not a lawyer, but, okay. So the land use is, in the bill, it allows you to take commercial and industrial sites and build workforce housing as long as you agree to 40% of the units being at 120% AMI or less. Is that specific enough?
What about a residentially zoned that you can have more density?
Right. So
No,
that,
this live local does not apply to multifamily zoning.
no.
So it's for commercial, industrial zoning, not multifamily.
Right.
So you have multifamily, you can't get more density.
You're
Well,
already zoned for it. Yeah.
Well, typically, a lot of cities and municipalities have density bonuses for workforce that are already built into the code. But, right, exactly. Yeah, it's really the commercial, industrial. So if you do 120% AMI, you get a 75% exemption. If you do 80% AMI, if it's 80 or less, you get 100% exemption. 80.01 to 120, 75%.
With some other limitations on that. By the way,
Yeah.
Charles wrote an excellent article in Live Local that just came out. So I would urge you to read through this. We've got on our website, we've got a very detailed bill we wrote. And come up afterwards, I'm glad to go into absolute brass tacks details on this hat if it's helpful for folks. So,
The next question, go ahead.
I heard, obviously we've said AMI, AMI, AMI. How does AMI relate to a salary? Because if you Google the average salary in Florida, it's 46 or 48,000, but average AMI is in the 60s. So how is household income separated from individual income?
It's based on household size. So Florida Housing publishes, area median income every year based on what HUD publishes every year for every county in America. And those charts based on number of persons in the unit have an income level. So it starts with AMI. You're used to hearing 60% or the average AMI, but the math is all done for you in charts by county that are readily accessible that tell you if you're a household of 4 and you're living in Orange County, the 120% income limit for that home is $111,000.
and the household is by bedroom unit, right? So
Right,
the
and
number of
exactly.
bedrooms is what you'd use.
And number of persons.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a chart that sort of spells this out and tells you what the upper limit is for each type. So a 2-bedroom with 4 people, 2-bedroom with 3 people, 2-bedroom, with 1 per. Blah, blah. It's all spelled out, and you have those ceilings that you have to abide by.
So AMI is not a person or an individual, it's a household. Correct?
AMI, median income, is an amount of money that statistically HUD determines is the median income for a county, and off of that you calculate the income ceilings for each unit type and number of persons per household.
Yeah, I've seen the charts with the AMI at the top and
Yeah.
the 1, 2, 3
Because you're used to
bedrooms.
just seeing rents, but there's also the income limits.
Right.
And the income limits are by household size.
There's a question, oh, go ahead.
Sure. So, structured parking is the death of most of these developments, and especially for workforce housing, even on 120% AMI, are you finding that you have to scale down the size of your unit significantly to make that monthly rent kind of increase in your rent per square foot per unit? Because my understanding is you're only capped on the monthly rent, you're not capped on the per square foot.
Correct. Right. I mean, we've been all shrinking units for
Right. So
in every asset class for years now in order to. So your point's well taken.
So you're
Yeah.
finding it.
We're trying to make deals
micro
work.
unit type to 450 to 650, 700 square feet on average per unit will only. That's the only way this will work for now. How will that be received, I guess, by the market, in your opinion?
At the end of the day, if the unit doesn't get rented at any, right? So you've got to You've got to build a unit size and unit type that is going to be well received, and then you have to deal with the consequences of now having income limits, okay, that will further constrain, because you're going to have people coming to want to rent that unit that are what we call over income, right? If the income for that unit is capped at 100 grand and this 3-person household is at 102, they have to go live elsewhere. So
it's that, don't forget, Sydney's point, which is excellent, which is it's a math problem, right? And the numbers have to work.
It always is.
And so I get a lot of calls. I can build a 100-foot square unit and get all of this. Okay, sure. But who's going to rent a 100 square unit? This is real estate at the end of the day, right? It's a real estate center. This is real estate we're talking about. The real estate has to work. And adding in some magic exemption or some magic zoning, whatever. If your real estate isn't good marketable real estate, you've wasted your time and a lot of money.
We're going to do 2 more questions, one here and there's one in the back there.
Wrote it down. What offset impacts, fees, or others should be made when converting commercial to residential to facilitate the long-term infrastructure needs of residential, given the lesser amount of revenue from a residential usage?
I didn't hear all that question.
All right. Sorry.
Okay. What offsets, impact fees, or others should be made when converting commercial to residential to facilitate the long-term infrastructure needs of residential?
Okay. So the question is, and maybe you guys answer as well, part of the math process, is what sort of offset should you have for impact fees or otherwise to support the infrastructure necessary for the housing that's been created? That's the question? What are your thoughts on?
Well, again, I think there are a lot of incentives already existing catering to in a lot of cities and counties that are trying to address impact fee waivers, deferrals, things of that nature to try and complement what we're doing here. It's really a series of incentives that you have to cobble together, I think, to sort of make the magic happen.
Right, and on the inverse of that, what happens is this: if you think about the infrastructure it takes to support an abandoned building, not much, right? You now convert that to a living, vibrant community of 100 to 300 people, it takes more infrastructure, right? No doubt about that. But go back to the last presentation, retail theft. And one of the things that they said was, this is systemic to, if you're growing up without a place to live, you're more likely to commit crimes. It's just that simple. Or if you're in a bad community, if we put communities where people work and people now live where they work, and they have a place to come home to, the educational outcome of those studies is immense. The health outcome is immense, right? Clearly, the sales tax and the income being created in that area is immense. The net benefit to these communities by allowing these people to build safe, decent housing that's affordable for everybody is off the charts at the end of the day.
All right.
It offsets any sort of loss for property tax exemptions.
I'm
Go
getting
ahead.
yelled at. Tim, if you could do your question super fast.
Okay, I'm going to start by quoting my friend Walter Duke, the former mayor of Dania Beach and prominent real estate professional in South Florida. Obtainable and affordable housing is economic development. If you look at people moving to our state, the 2 complaints they have is education, and they can't find an affordable place for their middle-income workers to live. So I think everybody in this room, if they want to build more industrial, more hotels, more retail, we need to get obtainable housing in this state. And I'm going to give you my quote. This bill is the Ozempic of obtainable housing. It's a miracle, and we need to get it accepted. And I've met my kindred brother today in David Leon, who's a big evangelist. David Deutch knows this from our text at 6 in the morning on this. But my question is really, assuming people buy into my statement, what can every one of us in this room, what should we be doing to make sure our city governments, our county governments, our bankers, and our equity providers are on board with economic development from the state of Florida and being the nation's leader in providing obtainable housing?
In one sentence.
In one sentence.
Another question, right? I think we start here, right? There's these kind of groups and educating people on the need and a potential solution. And what I tell folks is live local. That's not the end point. That's the starting point. It's not perfect. It's a place to start and build on, and we just got to build it. At the end of the day, you got to underwrite it and you got to build it. You keep doing that, I think we'll be just fine.
Be flexible.
Sydney.
That was educate. I mean, look, to your point, Tim, I just had a rising star in my company tell me he's leaving at the end of April to go to Atlanta because the cost of living and housing is so much more reasonable and effective, and he can live a much better life than in South Florida. So it's incumbent upon all of us to get behind this, educate, and then activate. We gotta start building these homes so that folks have a place to live that is affordable and reasonable, and make the dream a reality.
I just want to thank the panelists here. I love your enthusiasm and your drive for this and the opportunity here. And to Tim's Ozempic, I think we're late for lunch. So
We're late.
thank you
We're
so
late.
much
We
for
can-
doing this. We really appreciate it.